welcome to part two of our Suffolk Latch. Now, it's been a while since I've actually, or I don't think I've ever done videos like this. And what I always hate about everything is that, when you're doing these off the cuff things, you're kind of always prototyping and you make a lot of mistakes. And normally I don't have a lot of mistakes in my videos, but man, I had some kind of screw ups in this one. So, what we're doing here is we're actually making the thumb latch, and I'm making sure that I can fit through our little keyhole right here. But it had been so long since I had made one of these guys. I was envisioning because you have the thumb latch on one side, but the other side is what you actually put your hand on to lift the latch from the opposite side. So I was going to do this nice big curved rat tail on the back side. At least that's what was in my mind. But the problem is that's not exactly how it works because you have to be able to feed that thing through the keyhole. So I took all this time and effort here to make this nice, big, sweeping, cool handle for the opposite side. I mean, I'm getting on it here, buddy. I mean, I'm making something nice. What's going to have to happen here in just a few minutes? I'm going to figure out that this thing does not fit. So I'm going to take all that work right to the cutting hardy and snip it right off. So yeah, I mean, pretty beautiful. And then, hey, dummy, guess what? It don't fit. Okay, so I screwed up. So I tried to back it off a little bit to try to make it fit on that end of it to try to regain some of my dignity. But that's it just it just didn't work out that way. I tried it a couple of different ways. I was like, no, this is just gonna suck. So anyway, I ended up having to shorten that pretty considerably to make it work right, and yeah, so it happens. Even when you've done these things a lot, unless you've got a written down recipe or a written down pattern, you're always going to have some room for mistakes. But that's the great thing about doing blacksmith work is a cutting hardy or restarting the piece does a good job. But hey, check it out, it fits. So that shows how the actual thumb latch works. Now, of course, what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to drill a few holes after we clean this up now, when you're doing traditional work, especially slitting and drifting, it's not like you're doing machine tolerances, but you have to spend a lot of time cleaning up forge marks and hammer marks. And even in the old days, now, even though I'm using this super nice sander, files were a huge portion of that type of work back in the day. So, all right. So here, what am I doing? I am going to be making the actual latch itself. Now, this is going to go on the back side of the door. It's a relatively simple piece. A lot of this work here is just kind of more for decoration and aesthetics. What I'll do is that little round area there is going to be where the lag bolt mounts it into the door, and then I'm going to make a nice steady taper towards the end. This is where, if you're in a production shop and you're actually looking to get something done, this is where combining both the power hammer and your hand techniques really comes in handy. Because a lot of this detail shaping you really need to do with your hand hammer. But being able to quickly swap over to the power hammer like this keeps everything straight, uniform, and moving very quickly. So a lot of people, talk about the traditional way. And yeah, if you want to do it completely traditional, no problem. But in the shop, we kind of have to get something done. So by hybridizing the technique, we get kind of the best of both worlds. And if you see right there the flat side of those dies, man, I cannot tell you how useful that is for this type of work, because one of the most difficult things is making sure that your work stays consistently flat. And if you've ever done a lot of work like drawing out a lot of metal, man, that's one of the biggest issues, trying to keep that joker like in dimension. It's really, really tough, and so just running it through those flat dies real quick makes a huge difference. So here's just a little bit of cleanup work. I'm going to round this bad boy out, make it a little bit nice and rounder. Again, if I was really doing a super precision job, I'd mark all this out on paper and then cut it out. But like I said, we got stuff to get done. Wire brush, the terror of the shop. If you That's a super heavy brush. Yeah, you see that right there? that's that's why those things are dangerous. Also, in the fact that it like throws deadly steel spikes at you. So what I'm doing here is I've got to make a actual guard for that latch to keep it towards the door. And what I'm doing is I am laying this over this anvil block to make this little catch here. Now, this is some freehand stuff, and I'm going to tell you, I wish I had tightened it up just a little bit. Now, if you actually look at that Hardy tool, it's actually designed to go under the power hammer. Now, it was used for making latches of a slightly different size. But when you make these tools and jigs, they give you very square corners. And the aggravation with this one is that right there where those little feet come down, that corner really isn't 9 degrees. It's kind of an angle. And what will happen is that will cause your latch to actually stick a little bit and not like have a hard stop. So, like I said, always, as much as I love doing stuff the old way in freehand, that's just not what they did a lot of the times. When they were doing production of these things, it was very similar to our modern manufacturing. They had jigs, they had specialty tools that allowed the right piece to be made correctly, quickly. So, all right, what in God's name am I making here? All right, let's see. We've got to have our latch. We've got to have our catch. Okay. All right. So this is going to be what the latch actually catches into. I guess you could call this the catch. This is a very blunt, basically a little tapered spike, and this is the ramp so that when the door closes, the latch will hit it, lift, and there will be a little cutout that will allow the latch to lock into the piece there. So what has to happen is we've got to make the ramp first, and so that's why there's such a shallow taper here. And then we're going to have to come in and actually cut a 90-degree angle on the back side there that will actually catch the latch itself. So here I'm using a top tool just to kind of delineate it just a little bit. Tippy tap, tippy tap. And again, notice those flat jaws. No matter how much you're beating mess out, as long as you keep it in dimension, it's a lot easier to work with. Now, here, at some point, I actually need to cut this bad boy. There you go. So we're going to slip that off right there. Grab it with our tongs, and this is going to allow us to make the spike a lot easier. So what happens is this thing is actually driven into the door frame. It's one of the cool things about this type of hardware. It just drives straight into the door. There's no mounting hardware. You just hammer it in. So the piece that I'm making now is essentially a nail. Now, if I had a couple different tools in the power hammer, I could do it there, but it's simply quicker to do it by hand. So you'll take a couple of heats. You can see that shoulder forming. That's the actual catch. Again, going back to those flats to keep everything in dimension. Again, just cannot overstate how handy that feature is. We'll continue working that out, and hopefully when we get down to a point or get to a good shape, make sure she's nice and flat, and then we should go back to the grinder just to clean everything up, sharpen points, and really make that 9-degree angle for the catch to get. Now you can see I'm kind of fighting the tongs a little bit here, is because I don't have tongs that are specifically made for doing this hardware. And that's one of the things I try to impress upon a lot of people is that, when blacksmiths made these things in mass, they weren't just doing one-offs. Blacksmiths back in those days rarely did one-offs. They were making volume hardware. So when you can take the time to actually make the right tong or the right tool for the job, you were just so far ahead just for being able to hang on to something. So I'm refining the actual catch itself and cleaning up the spike that goes in. And here in a second, I should clean up the ramp itself, which is super important because that ramp is what the latch rides on. And if that's not smooth, then it's going to have a tough time actually riding that ramp. So I will rough it out on the 36, but this piece I actually round. And you see how polished that is. I actually went down to 220 grit and put it on the polisher just to let that piece ride up. So now it's time to drill some holes and make some assembly. What I'm doing is center punching everything, making sure it's marked out well. And we're going to put an 1/8 of an inch hole through this guy. Now, Jay, of course, the guy that taught me, he would actually use nails for this, but I have found that 1/8 of an inch mild steel brazing rod is a very handy thing. It's not a nail, so you don't have the head, so you got to get both sides done pretty easy, but it makes a really good rivet, especially for something like this. Both sides have been countersunk, so I should take the torch. And this is where riveting is really important to actually use the torch because you've got such a long, thin piece. If you don't heat that head, that whole piece is going to tend to actually bend. So a liberal application of heat will allow that head to form, and you've got a good thumb latch there. So we just need to drill a couple of more holes in here and she should be ready to mount. Now, of course, we actually use a square head lag bolt. Looks really good, simulates the old nail, saves us a lot of time. They're 1/4 inch, and of course, we drill slightly over that. I think we drill like a 5/16 over that just so that we got a little bit of gap in there, a little bit of play, and that makes things so much easier. But now, our next video, we're actually going to be installing this, and it'll make all the hardware make sense. Right now, it's just a pile of parts, but you guys will get it. So we had to do a little bit of jury rigging, even though this is made for a big flat door. Our door is not a big flat door. All the bracing's on the visible side, so we had to make a few adjustments to make this bad boy fit, but hey, it works. But guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope to see you guys for part 3, and hope you guys have enjoyed this new format. I will see you guys a little later.